What is MCC? MCC is a small yet mighty development agency of the US that takes a pretty innovative approach to fighting poverty. As many of you know, many development agencies focus on a single sector: health, education, humanitarian assistance. MCC looks at each country individually and says, how do we think about economic growth in terms of alleviating poverty here? So over a decade, $10 billion in grants, 70% of that has been invested in roads, in power, in clean water, those sort of big drivers of change. Now, it's easy to get caught up in the pessimism when it comes to development. You see the headlines about the refugee crisis, extreme ideology, pandemics, but you don't often see headlines with the good news, the latest poverty statistics. In fact, the number of people living in extreme poverty has been cut by more than 2/3 since 1990. This dramatic decline has primarily been driven by economic growth. While social programs and the sector-specific interventions, such as global health, have played a critical role, most of the reduction in poverty has been due to sustained growth in the developing world. This is the principle that MCC was founded on in 2004, that economic growth, when it is widely shared, is the only sustainable way to accelerate development and eradicate poverty. We know that growth is what helped lead to the achievement of MDG 1, and we're sure that it will be critical to reaching the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. But the quality of growth matters. We have to ensure that growth reaches the poor, which is one of the reasons MCC focuses on good governance. We use a scorecard to determine eligibility, and the scorecard tracks indicators in 3 categories: economic freedoms, whether the countries themselves invest their resources in their people, and good governance, rule of law, corruption, and the like. On average, countries that perform well on MCC's eligibility scorecards also share the benefits of economic growth and perform much better than countries that fail the scorecard. So MCC has certainly found that fighting inequality and exclusion, especially of women, is essential to promoting sustained and widely shared growth. Let's just consider for a moment the role of women. As many of you know, the recent McKinsey report found that advancing women's equality alone could add $12 trillion to global growth. We certainly know that through our projects. I'll share one example. I was recently in Zambia, where we in Lusaka are working at the first recycling program in the city. And the innovators of this program quickly saw that women were the key to making this work, both in terms of collecting the waste, but also into going to the homes and the families and talk to them about what does a recycling program look like. And that's been women who have been doing that there. It's also critical to think about how you approach growth from an environmental perspective. There's another misconception that growth is mutually exclusive with sustainable, climate-smart development. In fact, we know the two are inexorably intertwined. The poor are on the front lines of climate change because they tend to live in environmentally susceptible areas. And climate change threatens to turn back the development progress that we've made. Here again, though, there is reason for optimism. The early stages of development in many countries present opportunities to leapfrog older technologies. We're working in Benin, where only 50% of the population has access to electricity. And of course, solar makes a lot of sense there. So we're going to do an on-grid, the biggest on-grid solar project in the country. In short, while there's significant challenges, there's plenty of room for optimism in international development. You guys are change makers, you're advocates, you're activists. I urge you not to get caught up in the negativity. Sustainable and widely shared economic growth can lead and has led to poverty reduction, wide scale. I think we should celebrate how far we have come, and we should sprint to the finish line. So that's my talk for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes? Sure.
When you're doing things like the work you're doing in Benin,
Yes.
how do you work with the local communities to ensure that there's buy-in for the projects that you're working on?
It's a great.
The poor, I think, that you work on in Cotonou,
Yes. So MCC's model really walks the walk in country ownership. So it starts with a core team of Ghanaians, of the country partners, the professional staff, and has a board of directors that is leading it. At the end of the day, MCC will only have 2 Americans for a $500 million investment in Benin. And so the first principle is that the design of the project and the implementation of the project are all the local population. Secondly, we bring in civil society and the private sector when we're scoping what it is the project specifically will be. And every visit that I make, I'm meeting with that advisory council, and I'm saying, what are we doing right, and what are we doing wrong, and how is this not working? So in addition, I would point out MCC, which is often known for being very evidence-based and data-driven, we have a team of professionals on gender and social inclusion that are on par with our economists. We have them matrixed into every team, both from Washington and on the ground. And their lens and their prism that they're evaluating that project is who is the beneficiary pool? How representative is it? What data do we have on it? How can we track them? And how do we work with the community to further integrate it? So it's a very different model of how we're actually doing development. Thank you. Sure. I'm sorry, I can't hear. So MCC's new. It's only been around for 12 years. We have roughly, over those 12 years, done 27 compacts. At any given time right now, I think we are active in 17 countries. So it's a smaller subset. I spoke of the eligibility criteria. And then we are developing new compacts in 6. Sure.
Do you mind talking a bit about what the criteria are?
Sure. So eligibility or investment or both? Eligibility. Yeah. The MCC Scorecard. Available on our website, soon to come forward with an app. It is tracking 20 indicators, none of which are the US government indicators. You would be familiar with these indicators from the World Bank, IFC, transparency, heritage. They're clustered in these 3 categories. So in the economic freedom category, there's the ease of doing business index, but there's also the gender and the economy indicator. In the governance category, there is democracy, corruption, transparency, rule of law. And then on investment in people, we're looking at indicators such as what are the immunization rates, what's the rate of primary education completion, how are the resources of the country itself being put back into the country. We're looking for partners. Partners are compared against their peers. So low-income countries against low-income countries, Niger against Nepal, for example. We're looking for countries that are in the upper 50th percentile as compared to their peers. But also there is a hard hurdle, a must-pass around corruption and democracy. Check it out. Thank you. Sure.
What are your conversations like with big businesses that have such a global reach? Are you in talks with them? Do you find complications or exploring initiatives?
So we're working in infrastructure, and as you might imagine, private investment in infrastructure, in 65% of the portfolio has been in Africa, is an opportunity for us to leverage our investments. We're always in conversations with what sectors we might work in and how. I think a really interesting role for MCC to play is, I'll give you the example of Ghana. There, it's a $500 million grant. It's entirely invested in the energy sector. As you know, there's quite a bit of private capital in generation. That's not a good space for MCC. MCC is working in what's usually the public good, which is the utility. So we're looking, and we're putting $500 million to make that a credit-worthy, turning around the utility itself, so that we can help the sector bring in greater investment and actually lead to access. That's one example. Terrific. Thanks. You guys are all very attentive. Go eat, drink.